Hello, you're watching Eye on Africa with me, Yenna Lee. Your headlines on the continent tonight. South African President Cyril Ramaposa calls for calm after tensions between police and protesters in Soweto. The clashes come after the alleged police killing of a 16-year-old boy. Tanzania bans 3 more Kenyan airlines from entering its airspace. This as Kenya refuses to relax quarantine measures for Tanzanian travellers. And we take a look at the situation of African domestic workers stranded in Lebanon. Many have become jobless and homeless since the economic crisis there. Our guest tonight is the founder of an NGO for migrant rights. But first, South Africa's president has called for calm. This after clashes broke out between protesters and police this week in a Johannesburg suburb. Tensions are on the rise since the death of 16-year-old Nathaniel Julius. His family says he was shot to death by police on Wednesday after he reportedly failed to respond to their questions. The teen had Down syndrome. The country's police watchdog has launched an investigation into the killing. Shirley Sitbon explains.
El Dorado Park is a township ravaged by drugs and crime. This week it faced one of its worst tragedies. This teenager, 16-year-old Nathaniel Julius, was shot dead. These protesters and the boy's family say that it was the police who killed him.
He was standing there and the cops called him over, and when he went over, they just shot him.
Witnesses say the police shot the boy because he wouldn't answer their questions. But Julius, who suffered from Down syndrome, could not talk.
After shooting him, they picked his lifeless body up, threw it in the back of the van, drove off to Baragwanath Hospital, and just told the doctors there that he was caught in a crossfire. It was a gangs fighting at Hillbrook Flats, El Dorado Park, but there was no fighting.
Since the shooting, hundreds have protested. El Dorado Park was a black township during apartheid, and they believe it's still being stigmatized, saying police is using excessive force in their community.
Innocent children can't die like this because this child's mother never asked for her child to die.
When officials said the case is being investigated and the police minister visited the family, many South Africans were skeptical, saying the officers involved should have already been arrested.
The West African bloc ECOWAS has reiterated its desire to see civilian rule return as soon as possible to Mali. They promise sanctions relief in exchange for a transfer of power within 12 months. Mali's military junta had wanted a 3-year transition period. They've now cut that request down to 2. Here's what Niger's President Mahamadou Issoufou had to say during tonight's summit.
Si nous pouvons considérer que la question de la libération du président Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta et celle de sa restauration dans sa fonction sont ainsi résolues, il n'en est pas de même pour celle du retour à l'ordre constitutionnel qui suppose le retour des militaires dans leurs casernes. Elle refuse de regagner les casernes alors que le pays est en guerre, ce qui exige plus que jamais que l'armée se concentre sur sa mission traditionnelle.
Turning our attention next to an ongoing row between 2 East African countries. Tanzania has banned 3 more Kenyan airlines from its airspace. It's a tit-for-tat measure after Kenya excluded its neighbour from a list of quarantine-free countries. Dar es Salaam has not released COVID-19 infection numbers since April. Nairobi, meanwhile, says there are over 33,000 confirmed cases and over 560 deaths in Kenya. For more on this story, here's France 24's Mukelwa Lachwayo.
In what is seen as yet another standoff between Tanzania and Kenya, Tanzania has banned 3 more Kenyan airlines from entering into their country. It's seen as a retaliation on the side of Tanzania after Kenya kept to its decision to require passengers coming from Tanzania to quarantine for 14 days. And this is because Kenya feels that Tanzania has been very relaxed in its response to COVID-19. Earlier on, President John Magufuli refused lockdown measures, and he also halted the release of COVID-19 data in April. Now, these countries are the 2 biggest economies in the region and home to 2 large ports where goods enter and leave the region. Now, even though Tanzania is a critical destination for Kenya's national carrier, Kenya Airways, officials here have said that they will not put the health of their citizens at risk over commercial interests.
Time now for a quick look at other news that we're following for you across the continent. The UN's human rights chief has called for an investigation into the death threats against Nobel Peace Prize laureate Dr. Denis Mukwege. She says that his life seems to be at serious risk. The Congolese gynecologist and his family have been targeted by phone and online. The threats appear to be linked to Dr. Mukwege's work, treating the victims of sexual violence. At least 3 people have died in ethnic clashes in Sudan. This after the nomination of a new governor in the country's eastern Kassala state. The Prime Minister's office says that an authorized protest turned violent and that more security is to be sent to the region. Back in July, Abdallah Hamdok announced that he'd replace military governors with civilian ones across the country. But the project has at times laid bare tribal rivalries. The Muslim Brotherhood's Mahmoud Azzat has been arrested. Egyptian police found the high-ranking leader in a flat just outside Cairo. The 76-year-old was the acting supreme guide of the Islamist organization and had previously been sentenced to death twice in absentia. Azzat had been in hiding for 7 years since the ouster of Mohamed Morsi, who was a member of the Brotherhood himself. Now, thousands of foreign workers in Lebanon have been demanding to be sent back home. An unprecedented economic crisis, worsened by the pandemic and now crippled by the Beirut blasts, has left the country's migrant worker population stranded abroad. The country is home to at least 250,000 international domestic employees, many from countries such as Ethiopia, Kenya and the Gambia. Some are now homeless and without their passports. Earlier this week, dozens of women protested outside their embassies. Take a listen to what they had to say.
I finished my contract in Lebanon. I wanted to go back. They refused to send me back. And this bomb explosion happened. Now there's no economic. Now you want $100, you got maybe 700,000 Lebanese or 1 million. Who can bring that kind of money to go back to your country?
Now in Lebanon, no money, no work. About this crisis, everyone knows, not only us. So we cannot work without paying. We just need help to go back home.
Now, earlier I spoke to Bansheema, the founder of a migrant rights organization. I started by asking her why it's so difficult for these women to leave Lebanon.
No one has the documentation. Hundreds of thousands of domestic workers stuck in the country wanting to go home. They have no money, they have no passport, they have no paper, everything controlled by the sponsors. So when they want to go home, they need the permission of the sponsor, the one. They are living outside without documentation as well. The passport is controlled by the sponsor. They need permission to leave from the country, from the sponsor and from the general security. So this is why they cannot go home. And at the same time, they have no food. They have no money for rent. They are even struggling to have water to drink to survive. So they don't have any documentation. They don't have money for ticket.
Now, rights groups have long denounced this sponsorship system that you talk about that ties workers' immigration status to their employers. You were once a domestic worker in Lebanon. What was your experience with this kafala system?
Well, kafala system is like they legalize the slavery system on the paper, so people, the sponsor can do whatever they want on the domestic worker. At the same time, the domestic worker, they don't have any law to protect them. As my experience, I worked as a domestic worker for 7 years in Lebanon, and I saw my passport for last time the day I arrived in Lebanon. That's 9 years ago. Now I leave the country. I'm in Canada. Still, I didn't see my passport because my passport was controlled by my sponsor, and she refused to give. I worked for free for 6 months. I was working for the sponsor that we don't have enough foods. So mine, not just like mine, worse than mine. The domestic worker have been treated. Even they are treating now. They have been slaved and paid for years, and also refused to send home. Some of them, they work under the sponsor house, but they don't have any documentation. The situation is really worse.
So the system has been going on for a long time, and perhaps now it's worse because of the crisis that Lebanon is facing. What's your organization demanding?
Well, first, when the financial crisis starts, when the COVID starts, every nationality lives in that country. American, Canadian left because they have passport and they have money. The domestic workers are stuck there because they don't have money and they don't have a passport on their hands. We are asking the African Union, especially, we are the majority, African are the majority domestic worker in Lebanon. We are suffering and we needed African Union to wake up, and before they pick a dead body on the street, they need to do something about it. And the Ethiopian government need to wake up also, they have to take an action before they are picking dead body from the Lebanon. And also, we really asking the Lebanese government to remove the exit visa process to allow the domestic worker to go home free, because none of sponsors are afford to pay, and then they cannot stay in that country without getting any paid or without any proper living condition. So they have to know we are really struggling. We left there without any support, no food to eat, no water to drink, no medication. We have, many domestic workers are thrown on the street by their sponsor. They are exposing for COVID, and they are exposing for harassment and rape. And they have to know, this is enough. We can't take it more than this. They have to let those women go home.
That's all we have time for on this edition of Eye on Africa. Today's show was produced by Maya yet again and her team behind the cameras. Thank you for watching.